Will my wife ever trust me again after a porn addiction? That's the question I hear more than almost anything else. And the guys asking me this aren't just curious, they're terrified they just destroyed the most important relationship of their life. Maybe she's sleeping in another room right now. Maybe she's going through your phone before bed every single night. Maybe she's just completely fine at dinner and then 2 hours later, she's asking you to account for everywhere you've been in the last 3 days. And you're trying. You're really trying. You've stopped watching porn, or you're trying to stop, and some part of you keeps thinking, I'm stopping, so why isn't the relationship getting better? Here's what I've learned. That question, will she ever trust me again, sounds like one question, but it's really two questions. The first is whether trust can come back at all. The second is whether what you're doing right now is actually going to bring it back. And those two questions have very different answers. The guys asking me this aren't weak. These guys know how to solve hard problems. I work with guys who run companies, guys who have big teams, negotiate deals, and can handle a crisis without blinking, guys who build and fix things for a living. But this one is a thing that they can't stop on their own. So they do what everybody does now. They Google it, and one in the morning, they get on Reddit, they read through some threads where 40 different strangers are contradicting each other, and none of it actually tells them what they actually need to do. Is she ever going to look at me the same way she used to? I'm not going to hand you a date on a calendar, nobody can, but I can tell you what I've actually watched happen across the few hundred who have sat before me and sat right where you're sitting right now. And the honest version of how it grows is probably not what you're expecting. Better in some ways, harder in others. And honestly, most guys get the hard part backwards because most guys think the hard part is just quitting the porn. A guy gets caught or he finally comes clean on his own. He's terrified, so he white knuckles it. 30 days go by, no porn, 60 days, maybe even 90. And in his head, he's thinking, okay, I did the hard part, I stopped. Why is she not over this yet? He brings her flowers, he's trying, he keeps saying, I haven't touched it in 3 months. What more do you want me to do? Sometimes the better he does, the worse she feels. Why is that? Because when he was actively using and lying, she had a distraction. There was a fire to put out every week, something new to catch him in. But once the behavior actually stopped, all that adrenaline drains out of her body, and what's left underneath is years of pain she never had time to actually feel. The water goes still, and now she can see straight to the bottom of it. He stopped. He thought quitting porn was the hard part. It wasn't. Picture a bad ankle sprain, the kind where you're on crutches for a while. The doctor eventually tells you you're healed. Go ahead and walk on it, but you just don't trust that. Not really. You put a little weight on it first, you take one step, that's okay, that held. You take a few more, you go up one stair, it holds again, you go up a whole flight, still good, right? Then something happens. Somewhere in there, you get a little too confident and you twist it again, even just a little, and that sets you right back to barely trusting it at all. Now you're limping again, testing every single step from scratch. That's exactly what rebuilding trust for your wife looks like. It's not one big moment where she suddenly decides to believe you. It's hundreds of tiny steps where you said something and it turned out to be true, stacked on top of each other over and over for a very long time. And one slip, even a small one, can knock all of that down back to zero in her mind. While all that's happening, she's going through something completely different. While you're out there testing your ankle, proving you can walk on it again, she is not calmly sitting on the sidelines cheering you on. Some days she's completely fine, warm, even hopeful. And then that same night, she's up at midnight going through your phone again, asking you to account for 3 hours from earlier that day that she's already asked you about twice. I've had guys tell me she called them everything in the book, a liar, a narcissist, worse than that. And then the next morning she's making coffee like nothing happened. That swing is not her being unstable. That is what trauma does to a person. Her body went through years of being told everything was fine when it wasn't. Now her nervous system is permanently on alert for the next time that happens, even on days when nothing is actually wrong. It's the same thing that happens to someone after a bad car accident. They flinch at a car horn 3 blocks away from where the accident actually even happened. If a guy doesn't understand that, he reads her bad days as proof that it's never going to work. And that's exactly the moment a lot of guys give up, right when she's actually closer to coming around than she ever had been. So here's the real answer, the one I actually believe after watching this play out hundreds of times. Yes, she can trust you again. But it's going to take a long time, longer than you want it to, and it only happens if two specific things are true at the same time. The first one is obvious. You actually have to stay sexually sober, not white knuckle it for a few months and calling it done. Real sustained sobriety, the kind that holds up on a bad week, not just on easy ones. But here's the one that surprises guys every time. Sobriety alone does not bring back trust. I've watched men stay completely sober and still lose the marriage because they never changed anything else about how they were showing up in the relationship. The second thing has to become true too. You have to become a genuinely different man inside the relationship, not just a man who isn't looking at porn anymore, a man who tells her the truth even when the truth makes him look bad, a man who doesn't get defensive the second she brings up her fear, a man who has completely stopped turning this around on her. I've had guys actually say to their wives, well, if you gave me more attention, maybe I wouldn't have looked. That sentence has to be completely gone, not softened, gone. What replaces it is a man who treats her better in the ordinary, boring, unremarkable moments of a Tuesday than he ever did when he was in his addiction. Most men know how to quit, they don't know how to recover. Let me tell you about a guy I worked with, 47 years old, built his own business from nothing. For 20 years, he told his wife the same thing over and over. I'll stop. And he meant it every single time he said it. He'd do well for a few weeks, sometimes a few months, and then he'd be back right at it over and over again. Eventually, she sat him down at the kitchen table and told him she wasn't sure she wanted to be married anymore. He told me he went out to his car afterwards and just sat there in the driveway, not driving anywhere, just sitting there, realizing he was about to lose the most important relationship of his entire life over something he had spent 2 decades telling himself he had under control. That was the moment everything changed, not because he hit rock bottom. Plenty of men hit rock bottom and stay there. It's changed because for the first time, he stopped trying to do this on his own. So slowly, through lots of little acts of courage, repeated over and over, the trust actually started to come back. By the time he was finished working together and working with us in the program, he had a marriage that felt different than it ever had in years, different than it ever had. Remember those two questions I told you about at the beginning? Can trust come back? Almost every guy I meet is convinced the answer is no. A year later, those same guys tell me something they've never imagined. Our marriage is actually better than it was before. Not because of the affair, the lying, or the addiction was some hidden blessing. It wasn't, but because going through the process of actually changing instead of staying sober made him into a man worth trusting in the first place. The only question now is, where do you want your relationship to be in the next 12 months? If you're standing where that guy was, standing in the driveway, wondering if it's the last thing that finally cost you everything, there's a link below to schedule a confidential call with our team. We'll help you understand what's actually going on, answer the questions you've been sitting with, and help you figure out what your next step should be. If it's the right fit, we'll show you exactly what it looks like working together. Either way, you walk away with the call with more clarity than you have right now. And if you've ever wondered if maybe you don't have an actual addiction, that it's just a high sex drive that you're dealing with, watch this video next. It's popping up on your screen now.